Hello, everyone, and welcome to not just another episode of Lords of Limited. We've got the Aetherdrift crash course for you. My name is Ben Warney, and joining me on the line, as always, Mr. Ethan, Pride of the Road, Sax. Ethan,
Wow.
we're drifting. We're swerving. We're driving some cars. It's
We
Aetherdrift
are
time.
we are swerving around for sure. There were lots of twists and turns and some U-turns made by me during my evaluation of the cards yesterday. This was perhaps the longest. Like Jen had Jonah, he went down for a nap, she went upstairs, she came down, she was like, "Are you all done with your work?" I was like, "Nope, not yet." Like this was a tough set to evaluate cards, and we already started like chatting a little bit yesterday, and then we're like, we're blowing it, we can't, we gotta save it for the show.
Yeah, we had to shut it down. I prompted it with these cards are really hard to grade. And I think some of it is the 4-3-2-1 system's really good. It forces you to think about, what you're doing with cards. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Strap yourselves in, fasten your seatbelts, as it were. We've got a combined letter and number grading scale where we pick out the best of the best with A's and B's, and then everything that's not pulling you into a color, we rank 4, 3, 2, or 1 based on how many archetypes or how many decks we expect it to go into.
Yeah, which is a lot more difficult than just slapping a C or a C minus on something that feels middling. Like I agree. It really does force you to think about it. And I feel like you've bested me, or you've had more ammunition in the past coming into these with the number system for sure, where I'm like, this is a 0 or whatever. You're like, it's a 2. I have thoughtfully decided that this goes in green, white, and red, white. And I was like, I gotta be better this time. Especially I feel like I was a little off my game last week. I still don't know how I feel about start your engines and max speed now that we have the full scope of everything, do you have any updates to your thoughts on that?
I do. I do have a very clear thought. I don't know if this is how it's going to play out, but it has crystallized in my mind about your thing of, well, you don't want multiple max speed, whatever, because then you've already started and it doesn't matter. No.
Mm-hmm.
I do think if your deck cares about max speed, and there are going to be decks that do and don't, much like ring tempting, and if you care about max speed, you just want as many of them as you can have, because that gives you the most chance to start it as early as possible, and then once you get it started, it's going to be happening, and then all your cards that have that on them will benefit from you having speed that started early.
I very much agree with you, and this is after I did a practice draft. This will segue nicely into my little Patreon spiel. I did a practice draft with some folks in the Lords of Limited Discord yesterday, and I had a really good rare max speed payoff. I won't spoil it because that's the draft log we're going to take a look at on this week's episode of Lords Unlimited. But I had a max speed payoff at rare that I really wanted, and that's all of a sudden bumped up a lot of that cycle of like 3 drops at common that start your engines and then have the max speed payoff of 3 exile this from your yard, draw a card. I thought those were all like kind of whatever.
Yeah, you're way
and
too
now
low
I'm like,
on those.
what's that? I am way too low on those. Well, they're tough. I mean, they're not zeros for sure. We'll talk about them, I'm sure, when we get to the grading differences. But all of a sudden, once I had that rare, I was like, oh, I get it now. Now I want as many instances of start your engines as possible, because by the time this hits the battlefield, I'd love to have max speed already.
All right, boom, beat you to the punch. Got
Beat
max speed first. Let's go.
Well, let's chat about the Patreon page, which is where I did that practice draft, courtesy of our awesome Discord, patreon.com/Lords of Limited, is where folks can go to give back to the show if they so choose. We've got a lot of great perks, and I've been loving the Discord, especially with the plethora, even leading up to this, the plethora of different draft environments. I've been touching on some Chromatic Cube and being terrible at that, but it's great to then pop in on the Discord, see what folks are having success with, and then have some conversations with people, popping into some pack one, pick ones. It's just nice, especially when things are so disparate, to be able to be like, oh, I'm playing this now. I'll check in what people are doing with that. And then also checking in on the Aetherdrift spoiler discussion, getting in on a practice draft was really fun. The Discord is just awesome, and I think new set season is always a great time to join if you haven't already. And we've also got Lords Unlimited that I talked about. That's our weekly bonus podcast. You get access to that, plus access to our weekly episodes a day early, ad-free. All of that stuff is available via our Patreon page. And we want to shout out our new patrons the first week that they join. This week we're welcoming Dennis, Casey, Pips, Richard, Ramon, and Siddharth. Thank you. We really appreciate your support.
Yeah, cannot say thank you enough. And I just want to echo the Discord. Like during this week, I was insanely busy, and just being able to flip open my phone for like 2 minutes during passing period, see what the new cards are, like see what people are buzzing about. It is
Mhm.
awesome, and I really appreciate the Discord for keeping me in touch with Magic in times like this.
Yeah. Okay, so we have been revamping the crash course, and I should do my usual spiel here. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. We are not going to be doing a full card by card set review. Instead, we're going to be endeavoring to do some big picture stuff, highlight some cards where we have graded all the cards separately, highlight some cards where we have grading differences, and then at the end of the episode, we'll give you a picture of the top commons we expect to perform, the top uncommons in each color, some maybe sleeper cards, and some overall thoughts. But really endeavoring to give you as much big picture stuff as possible before your first, sealed event at your LGS for pre-release, and then your first drafts of the format online.
Yeah, love it. Are we ready to dive into that?
Let's dive in. Where do you want to start?
Let's start where we usually start. Let's take a look at removal and how it kind of lines up with things, or what is available in the format.
Okay, so there were some questions that I had, and where you download the show, you'll have a link to our grading spreadsheet where you'll see the columns of Ben's grades and my grades for all the commons and uncommons. There's also going to be a tab for removal. Also, WotC, I noticed when they on the article that's like the guide to Aetherdrift, where there's the draft archetypes, which we didn't have last week. They also have removal in one of those articles where like you just go hover over white and it shows you all the common and uncommon removal spells. I was like, okay, taking our jobs away from us, but I appreciate it. Respect. So I'll highlight some things that really stuck out to me in looking at the removal. There's no exile removal. Like, like the black damage spells or the kill spells. If a thing would die this way, exile it. -X. If it would die, exile it. Red's damage. If it would die, exile it. That's not here. Also, there's no pacifism effect, and more importantly, there's no O-ring effects. No like 3-mana enchantment, exile a thing until this enchantment leaves. I assume that is because a lot of the stuff that's usually destroy an artifact or an enchantment is more coupled with more worried about destroying artifacts or vehicles specifically, and so I think the enchantments were largely left out of that space. What we do have is a ton of scalable removal. So in terms of like it moving up the ladder of what it can kill. Black gets a -1/-1, a -2/-2, a -6/-6, a murder, and a bone splinters. Red gets a deal 2+, a deal 3, a deal 5, a deal 6, and we'll talk about this I think later, a pyroclasm with cycling, a 3-mana deal 2 to all things with cycling. So we usually get that, but black and red just really like checking those boxes, I think.
Yeah, I think the weirdest things to me about the removal as I was going through and grading, white leaves a lot to be desired, I think, as far as removal. And
Mm-hmm.
blue, I think, gets a little bit better than average, I think, as far as interaction looks to be. And then the green fights and bites are aggressively costed. Like green looks like it's getting some pretty good interaction. So I think white kind of got shafted compared to the other colors.
I think white definitely got shafted. White's best removal spell, as far as I can tell, is like white gets the exile spell actually because it's a 5-mana. Unless it's targeting a tapped thing, it's 2-mana exile a creature or vehicle. So that's your exile spell. Yeah, blue's spread of interaction is nice. It has some bounce. It has I'm gonna try and coin this. What do we think? A TOB, a top or bottom removal spell, like one of the
Ooh, a Tob
a Tob,
or a
TOB.
TOB.
I think I would say TOB, but Tob could be because Tob sounds too close to top anyway. But yeah, sort of the 4-mana blue spell of put a thing on the top or bottom, and it also has cycling. It also gets a claustrophobia that I think will probably end up being better because better than normal because of that ability to take care of a thing without putting it to the graveyard where there is recursion, ways to get things back, etc. My issue with green's fight and bite spell is there's no buff to them. Like there's no permanent or temporary buff attached to them. They are aggressively costed, but I think that is something to note.
Noteworthy for sure, but I think the fact that they are so aggressively costed does enough for me, and I think we're going to talk about those later.
For sure. There's no shortage of destroying artifacts or destroying vehicles, and that coupled with just sort of how I'm anticipating this format, I am just a little cooler on vehicles in general. I think we'll probably save that for end of episode takeaways, but there's lots of ways to answer vehicles efficiently, I think, or incidentally, right? You can just sort of put something like Gastel Blockbuster. I don't think this is like going to be a role play or anything, but it's 2 in a red, 3/2. When it enters, you can sack a creature or vehicle, and when you do, destroy target artifact and opponent controls. And so you can just sort of have incidental ways to be like, I wasn't planning on killing a thing, but now I can, or there's modal stuff that blows up artifacts. I do think vehicles sort of have a target on their back in this format.
That's fair, but I also think most people probably shouldn't be putting Gastel Blockbuster in their decks.
With the vehicle conversation, there's lots of or there's more than normal higher power creatures for lower mana costs. Like there's 7 2-mana 3/1s in the format, which is a lot. And I think there's then a discussion of, well, is then there a lot of X1 hate? There's not a ton. I mean, there's like, you can think of X1 hate as like pilot tokens or whatever, but in the sense of being able to mess with them before they're crewing or while they're crewing, like the big way to really screw up X1s is Dynamite Diver, as far as I can tell, which is a single red 1/1. When it dies, it deals a damage to any target. If you're loading up on 3/1s and the 1/4/1 in the format, and your opponent has a Dynamite Diver to trade off with one and then pick off the other, etc., that's going to be a blowout. But other than that, there's not a lot of X1 hate, as far as I could tell.
I just think it's going to be enough with Thopter tokens and pilots gumming up the ground, too. That's going to be rough when you top deck your 2-mana 3/1 on turn 5 or whatever, and your opponent has a pilot. Like, that's going to be super annoying.
I totally agree. So yeah, I agree. I think the interaction looks plentiful. White getting the shaft. I'm a little less jazzed about the green removal spell than you, but it sounds like we're going to be talking about those when we get to our grading differences.
Yeah, and so last week we didn't know all of the archetypes, and now we do, right? Because all the cards are out. So just to give people a rundown, if they have not been living in spoiler season as vicariously as we have. But so the archetypes are green-white, which is vehicles and mounts, black-white, which is max speed attrition, blue-red, discard aggro. So also we huge miss on our end on the cycling puns last week. That was not on my radar.
Yeah, that cycling is there because of cars and motorcycles. Yeah, I said in the Lords Limited Discord that I will need to hand in my dad joke card for missing that. That's
on you. Really, like if we're talking about niches on the podcast, like that's on you.
Yes, I take full responsibility for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Red, white, we have vehicles and mounts aggro. Red, black, max speed aggro. Blue, black, artifact bleeder. Such a cool name.
Yeah.
Red, green, exhaust mid-range. Blue, green, exhaust ramp. We kind of knew that those were doing exhaust stuff. Black, green, graveyard stuff, as per usual. Getting the real jazzy name there. And blue, white, artifact value.
Yeah. We did this for Foundations, and that was a little easier because it was a partial reprint set. It was core set, but I liked the idea of chatting about the colors and their identity and maybe trying to do a loose ranking. I was left to my own devices with these show notes and trying. Ben's usually our resident power ranker, but I decided to step up to the plate and attempt. And it was actually really helpful for me just to really try and do this and think about what do I think the colors are doing and why do I think this color is better than another color. And I also was thinking about, and maybe it's just because we're in a vehicle set, what I really liked in Neon Dynasty was this idea you put in place of the spectrum of colors, and that it was less so about a ranking and more so about where things fit. Because, red was a much maligned color in that format. You and I really liked red from jump, but it's just that red played in its own space because it was doing artifacts and didn't really play in the enchantment space, whereas other colors could. And on the other end of the spectrum, you had green, which didn't play with artifacts nicely at all, but did play in the enchantment space super hard. And I'm wondering if there's a certain spectrum. I was trying to call it, maybe it's artifacts to creatures, but something, and it was then starting to hit on why I like red so much, because it feels like it's at the intersection of so many things. It has its inherent synergy, and then it also has synergy across all the other colors as well.
Yeah, when I opened our show notes and read this, it really clicked for me, and I think solidified a lot of what I was already thinking about. So I'm pretty high on the artifact archetypes in the format, which are blue-black and blue-white. And I certainly think blue wants to do artifacts. Like that is what blue does well and does best. And so I categorize them as a spectrum. I kind of see it as blue, totally artifacts,
Mm-hmm.
black playing really well with artifacts. I think white's actually in the middle. So I would go like blue, all in on artifacts, black, pretty in on artifacts, and then white also in the middle of, I think pairs really well with blue to do
Yes.
artifact stuff, but I also think it's going to pair really well with red and green to do the creature beatdown stuff. And then I would put red on the other side of white with green all the way on the end of, wants to do creaturey stuff or stay pretty far away from artifacts.
From artifacts. I buy that for sure. Well, so the things I liked about red, so and my loose color rankings are not going to really be that helpful, but I think it'll probably lead us nicely into we're kind of bopping around here. So if you've been with us a long time, let us know what your thoughts are about the structure of the crash course here. But just trying our best to sort of shape our discussions. I really liked red because I was just like, oh, great interaction. It's got some card selection. It has inherent synergy with all the major themes of start your engines, mounts and vehicles, and cycling. So I really liked what red was offering. I had blue as my number one color for a long time, and then I bumped it down to second. But I could see blue being number one. There's a lot to like about blue too.
Yeah, I think blue is pretty clearly number one for me right now, but I haven't thought a lot about rankings. I've been more thinking about what they're doing, which is very out of character for me, I know. But if I had to give rankings, I feel pretty confident that I want black in last for
Mm,
me as far as a color, and I think blue near the top. But I also think if we're projecting things, I also
yeah.
think just Naya is going to come out of the gates swinging super hard. Like red, white, and green, white look like such straightforward decks that are going to hit so hard that have great gold uncommons.
So this was my struggle, and I think I'd like to just start getting into our grading differences. This was my struggle last night, yesterday, as I was wrapping things up. Was I was having a hard time reconciling my sort of lackluster feeling about White's cards, and I feel the same way about Black's cards as well. But my lackluster feeling about White's commons and uncommons and my excitement for its signposts. Like both of green white signposts, and I like red white's 2-drop more than the 4-drop vehicle. That of those 4 cards, I feel like that 4-mana vehicle is the least exciting. But if our thoughts from the Play Booster era is when there's double signposts, if they both hit, the archetype is very likely to hit. And I really like green white's signposts a lot.
Yeah, they're
But
insane.
I'm not jazzed about a lot of White's cards. So let's talk about them and let's see if I'm just missing or not thinking about them correctly. I think let's get into the grade differences, shall we?
Okay, so we're going to outline our new and improved numbers and letters grading scale. So A's, similar to always, your bombs, your game winners, cards that are good in many situations, especially when you're behind. Some of the best cards in the set, bomb rares and hyper-efficient removal spells. Cards like Liliana Dreadhorde General, Sire of Seven Deaths, or Spinner of Souls.
Your B's are strong cards that pull you into a color, make you want to play that color, reasons to be in a particular color or combination of colors. These are your best commons, your great uncommons, things like Faybloom Trick, Bake into a Pie, Cat Collector, and Dazzling Angel.
All right, those are it, the A's and B's that pull you into a color, and now we're into the numbers. So these numbers represent the number of archetypes. So there's 4 color pairs for each color. Like, for example, white cards can go in white, red, white, green, white, black, white, blue. The number represents how many of those archetypes we expect the card to perform in. So 4s, or sometimes 10s if they're colorless, but the colorless, it doesn't really work for colorless. It breaks down pretty hard there, but essentially we'll leave it at 4s, are cards that you want to play in any deck that can cast it. So cards like Burglar Rat, Beastkin Ranger, Squad Rallier, Soul Shackled Zombie. And this is a little harder to do with Foundations because it wasn't as deep of a set. I think in more advanced sets like Aetherdrift, it's much clearer when cards are going into certain numbers of archetypes.
2s or 3s are cards that don't go in every deck or only have synergies in certain archetypes. Cards like Ajani's Pridemate, Hungry Ghoul, and Strix Lookout.
A 1 is a card that belongs in only one kind of deck, whether that's either a specific color pair like red-white, or a general strategy like aggro or control, or maybe it's its own kind of build around, as we see with our first card example here in Homunculus Horde. That was a card that you built a deck around. It went in one deck and it was its own Homunculus Horde deck. Or cards like Inspiring Paladin, Involuntary Employment.
Yeah. And then your zeros, they can be cards that are unplayable, but we by and large don't really have actual unplayables. They're more a representation of cards that don't have a home, or it's a card that you won't miss having at the end of the draft. So it's not that zeros can't go in your deck. You'll play zeros in your decks, but it's just that they're not cards that matter. And that's our effort for this episode, is to try and hone in on what are the cards that matter? What are the cards we should be focusing on and thinking about going into our day ones of the format? So cards like Witness Protection, Crypt Feaster, Armasaur Guide, and Firebrand Archer. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are some of your relationship green flags? We often hear about red flags we should avoid, but what if we focused more on looking for green flags in friends and partners?
If you're not sure what they look like, therapy can help you identify green flags and actively practice them in your relationships.
I actually did exactly this with a counselor at school after I broke up with my college girlfriend. We made a list of things that I didn't like about that relationship and things I wanted from my next one. And then the person I started dating after that is now my wife.
Whether you're dating, married, and building a friendship, or just working on yourself, it's time to form relationships that love you back. And therapy can help you do just that.
BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable and convenient, serving over 5 million people worldwide.
Access a diverse network of credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties, and easily switch therapists at any time for no additional cost.
Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lords to get 10% off your first month.
That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lords. And now, back to the show. All right, so let's kick things off with white with the grading differences. We've got one right off the bat, very first card in the format, Brightfield Glider. This is a single white for a 1/1 possum mount. It's got vigilance, and when this creature attacks while saddled, it gets +1/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. It's got saddle 3.
Yeah, I gave this a 3. You gave this a 1. We also chatted about this last week, and I guess if I'm thinking about it a little bit more, maybe I just give it a 2. My thought was that blue-white was the only deck that wasn't going to want this. I think white-red and white-green are both going to want this.
I agree. I think I was wrong. I think I was thinking as mounts only. I think red-white does also. I don't think black-white particularly cares about this, except it's a 1-drop to get your engine started, so maybe it does.
Yeah. We spent so much time talking about this last week and you were so high on it that I was like, I can't. I'm definitely not giving it a 0, but I'm not. I'll be very curious to see how this card plays out. But I think I'm happy to settle on 2. I think red, white, and green, white both want this.
I mean, it's definitely going to be great in green, white. Like, you will want this card in green, white.
Yeah, that's probably true. Next up, we've got Light Wheel Enhancements. This is single white for an aura. It enchants a creature or vehicle. It has Start Your Engines. Enchanted permanent gets +1/+1 and has vigilance. And then there's a max speed payoff as you can cast this from your graveyard. Sort of, I forget what the aura was. Sentinel's Eyes from Theros, right? Or Theros Beyond Death could come back with a cheap escape cost. I did change my grade on this from, I forget what I had it as, but I put it down to a 0 and you gave this a 3.
Yeah, I really like this card. I think calling back to Sentinel's Eyes, that was an excellent card in its format because it pushed damage. This automatically wants to do that. Like, I think one of the key things with Start Your Engines is going to be, can you start your engines on a turn and then have an attack that same turn to get yourself up to 2? Like, you want to get 2 pips the turn that you start your engines, and I think Light Wheel Enhancements is going to be very good at helping you do that. And then once you have max speed, like, it's always going to come back for free. You don't have to exile the stuff like you did Sentinel's Eyes. Light Wheel Enhancements looks very strong to me.
So one of the many things that I've struggled with in evaluating cards for this format is that your non-creature, non-removal slots are pinched in your deck, right? And there are vehicles that you will want to put in those slots. And then there's some number of tricks, enhancements, card draw, whatever, like other effects that you may want to put in your deck. And I just wonder if Light Wheel Enhancements isn't too far down the pecking order to matter in the format. That's why I ended up giving it a 0. But I see I saw Sentinel's Eyes, and I see how important Start Your Engines is on a cheap play. So I definitely could be wrong. I don't feel strongly about my 0 here, but that's where my reserve is coming from.
I hear all that, and I think I feel strongly enough about Light Wheel Enhancements that I want to put it in my deck over a vehicle. Like, this just seems like it's going to have a large effect on the game. Vigilance lets you play offense and defense while you're trying to protect your opponent from getting max speed.
Mm-hmm.
This card does so much for 1 mana. And then also the possibility to recur it has me
Yeah.
really excited about the card. I
Okay.
think I'm in for this as one of my non-creature slots.
Love it.
Next up, we've got Collision Course. I give us a 4, you give us a 0. This is 1 and a white for a sorcery at common. Choose one. It deals X damage to target creature, where X is the number of permanents you control that are creatures and or vehicles, or destroy target artifact.
Yeah, the options were 0 or 4 for me on this
Correct.
card.
Yeah. It's either or. It's hard for
Yeah,
this to not go in a white deck. You're going to need some interaction.
but how are you picking this? I just feel like
You're not. You're spending no picks on this card, so that's why you think it's a 0.
That's why I think it's a 0.
Yeah, I'm in for it. Like this is much like I think in Foundations we had a lot of 4s in green. But I was like, the 4s just don't matter though. Like I don't think green's that good.
Yeah.
I feel similarly about Collision Course. So I think 0 or 4, however you want to think about it.
Okay.
But you're not picking it highly in draft.
Okay, that's fair. Moving on to the uncommons, we've got our first of this cycle of vanilla creatures. Each color gets an uncommon that's a vanilla. White's is Sundial, Dawn Tyrant. It's 1 and a white for a 3/3. It's a legendary artifact creature construct. And that's it. Just a 2 mana, 3/3. I gave this a 4. You gave this a 1. You're playing this in every deck.
I don't think so.
Yes. So you think your 1 is blue-white because of artifacts?
Yeah. Okay, you're probably playing it in red-white too?
Green-white. Green-white
black?
and red-white both want 2 mana.
Right, fine. This is a 4. Yeah, you're right. Okay. It's fine. There's just so many 3/1s running around, but this is still a good beater. Okay. You're right. Next up, we've got Air Response Unit, which is 2 and a white for a 3/3 vehicle at uncommon. It's got flying and vigilance and crew 1. You give us a 4. I gave us a 0. I refuse to be talked up on this card.
Yeah. This again feels like these are the options, 0 or 4, and I'm fine for this card to not matter. Again, I've done one practice draft, but one of my big takeaways from that is like the vehicles. Again, that idea of there's a pinch on your non-creature, non-removal spells you can put in your deck. The vehicles that are rares and mythics are good. There's a lot of really good high rarity ones that then it really pushes out a lot of the commons and uncommon vehicles from being in the discussion.
Yeah, I think we were talking a lot last week about the 1 and a white 3/2 vehicle that Scryed 2 on ETB.
Yeah.
Like I'm way lower on that card, I think, after seeing the full set revealed.
Yes, I am too. That was really our benchmark for a lot of discussions, and now I think we're sort of like pretty meh on that card at the moment.
Yeah.
So I'm fine to take Air Response Unit down to a 0 as well.
All right, that takes us on to Roadside Assistance. This is 2 and a white for an uncommon aura, enchant creature or vehicle. When this aura enters, create a 1/1 pilot creature token with this token saddles mounts and crews vehicles as though its power were 2 greater. Enchant a permanent gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. You gave us a B-. I gave us a 2. I'm sorry, Squire's Devotion. I'm sorry.
This was a really hard card for me to evaluate. This was one as I was going through, I skipped over this. I was like, I need to grade something easier than this. I need to grade something easier, and then came back to it as a blank space in the spreadsheet. I ultimately decided that this card just did a lot of stuff that I liked. So you like, what's it called? You like light wheel enhancements more than this, I guess. The single white aura that gives +1/+1 in vigilance and has start your engines.
That's an interesting question.
Because that's the same space that those occupy. This is better because this is 3 mana 1/1 that can crew stuff or saddle stuff and has this like big lifelink buff. I think this card is just gonna be pretty swingy.
Yeah, I think I like it at least as much. I think it's at least a 3 thinking about it. I think I missed white-black when I was grading it, but I feel pretty strongly that blue-white doesn't. The way I'm looking at blue-white and blue-black is you want like 23 artifacts, like you're building the Malcolm's whatever decks in Phyrexia all will be one.
So the problem I have with that, and maybe are we going to talk about, no, we both, so this is interesting. So Gear Seeker Serpent is reprinted in this format. This is 5 blue for a 5/6. Costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. An absolute banger in original Kaladesh, Aether Revolt, whatever format it was in. And I just don't see the support for it. Like, they're not being servos. Like, we had whatever, Cogworks Puzzle something. Like, there was like a 2 mana artifact that made a 1/1. I was looking for those ways to like make affinity stuff work. And it's why I'm kind of like, I like blue white in theory, but I'm kind of low on it because I don't see the support. I don't know how you get the deck with 20 artifacts.
I think the cards are there for it. I mean, I see it. That's why your Spectrum thing clicked so much instantly for me when I looked at the show notes, because like, oh yeah, that's how I'm thinking about the format. I just hadn't quite crystallized it that linearly. But I see the artifacts that are there. And I think the cool thing about it is they're kind of mediocre artifacts that you're likely to get on the wheel once you're in on the deck, but that the payoffs for having 20 artifacts in your deck or whatever, or 16 artifacts in your deck are so pushed.
I'm so curious to see if that's possible. Because I was thinking even blue white is going to like roadside assistance because putting it on a vehicle and having a pilot to crew it is really nice.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know why. Like, shouldn't have to twist my arm. I love this effect of a
Yeah.
card, especially in a format that looks like it's going to be two ships swinging past each other in the night at times.
I guess I feel like this kind of card is either going to be in the B range or it's a 0. It feels hard for it to be in the middle. You know, like I feel like we're either in a couple weeks, we're either going to be like, oh yeah, roadside assistance rules, or I don't care about picking roadside assistance. Feels hard for it to be a 2 or a 3 to
I
me.
I disagree. I think that's what Squire's Devotion ultimately was in.
Was it just a vampires card?
No, but it wasn't like it's not a card you can first pick. It doesn't pull you into white.
It might. That's what I'm saying.
I
That's
don't think I think my final argument is that I don't think Roadside Assistant pulls you into white.
Okay, that's fair. Next up, we have Alacrian Armory. It's 3 and a white for an artifact. Creatures you control get +0/+1 and have vigilance. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to one target mount or vehicle you control. Until end of turn, that permanent becomes saddled. If it's a mount and becomes an artifact creature, if it's a vehicle. I gave this a 0. You gave this a 2.
You just don't want to put this in your blue-white deck. That's why you're not getting enough artifacts.
You don't want to put this in any deck. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, this card's not great, but I do think
this is terrible. This is a horrible card. Like, you just want a creature.
I
It's like, oh, it can crew a vehicle or a mount. Like, yeah, creatures do that. You don't want this.
but I love giving my team vigilance. I'm a sucker for a card that gives my whole team vigilance. It's so powerful. And the +0/+1, I disagree. I like, yes, it's easy to look at this card and say terrible. I think there's something here. I think this card, I don't know that it's good, but playable certainly. And I've got my eye on Alacrian Armory. I think red, white, green, white might want to, and I think it does solve the issue of, having to put whatever 5 or 6 vehicles in your deck if you're in that space. Maybe it's
Okay.
green, white only. Maybe it's green, white, and red, white only. I gave it a 2, but I think in
Yeah.
those 2 decks, and maybe I doubt there's space for it in blue, white, but +0/+1 and vigilance to your team is real. That's an effect. Plus the free crew. Like, what if this were a creature that crewed your best vehicle and gave your team +0/+1 in vigilance? That would be very good. We got him, folks.
You did not. That was not a sigh of
Defeat,
anything other than frustration with
exasperation.
my dear friend Ben and this card. I don't know. I don't see it right now, but this is the kind of card that I often miss on in Crash Course time.
Okay.
So I could see it.
Next up, we've got the namesake card of the episode, Pride of the Road. It's 3 and a white for an uncommon 2/5. It's got vigilance and start your engines. And once you hit max speed at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature or vehicle you control gains double strike until end of turn. You give us a 0. I gave us a 2.
What's the 2? Red, white, green, white?
Red, white, green, white, I think, yeah. Or white, black also seems to care about starting your engines. I didn't have a strong color pairs in mind with my 2 here. It was just, if your deck is aggressive, I think that blue, white definitely does not want this.
Nothing says aggressive like a 4-mana 2/5 with vigilance.
But let's say you've hit max speed when this comes down. I like that it's got a big butt, so it's going to attack well, block well. And it does the combat professor thing if you've got max speed. Giving there are huge vehicles in the format. I think this is going to end games out of nowhere when it comes down and give something double strike. Or just put your opponent in the abyss.
I guess I'm just like, is it ending games that you're not already ending?
Maybe not.
My 0 is not unplayable. My 0 is just like, in the pecking order of like, I'm picking efficient threats, I'm picking removal, I'm picking powerful signposts, it seems so far down the list to me. A wise man once told me that like when stuff is 4 mana or more, It's really got to impact the board the turn it comes down, and this just doesn't do it to me.
This does if you have max speed. If you
You're
don't,
not
it's
gonna,
significantly
yeah,
less exciting. So
yeah.
maybe this is more of a payoff if you have max speed and you're not going to need to spend a pick on it, and therefore it's that kind of a zero.
I want to let's chat about max speed right now.
Okay.
Where now that we've seen everything in the format, where are you still feeling the same way you felt about it last week? Because my thought is that at least at non-rare, there's not a ton of payoffs that I feel like are. It's not as snowbally as I was worried about. Like the payoffs are pretty small. We'll maybe highlight a couple that jump out to me, and maybe this one should be jumping out to me, but it's not entirely.
I agree. Common and uncommon, they are small buffs, but they're meaningful buffs. I think it feels like, again, it feels like ring tempting to me. It feels like you're
Mm-hmm.
either really going to go after it hard and you're going to try to enable it quick, and your deck is going to be focused around getting max speed and cards that care about that, or like you might hit max speed in a game for your one or two cards that just started it on their own.
Yeah. Yeah, that I do feel like it's very similar to ring tempting in that once you're trying to do it, you just want as many instances of it as possible. So that I'm definitely walking back my feelings about that from last week. Whether or not Pride of the Road is something that I'm trying to enable, I feel less confident about.
That's fair.
It takes us on to blue. First up, we've got, oh yeah, Sky Streak Engineer. One and a blue for a 1/3 human pilot with flying. I gotta say, I'm a little tilted that there are pilots in the format that don't have
The
I
pilot
just feel
ability.
like that should just be a pilot thing. That's not like, oh, well, some pilots have it, some don't. Okay, anyway, 2 mana, 1/3 flyer with exhaust, 4 and a blue. Put 2+1/+1 counters on this creature. I gave this a 4, you gave this a 1, and I assume your 1 is blue-green?
Yeah, my one is blue green. I don't think you want this card in every deck. Like, you're not excited about a 1/3 is less good than normal. There's 3/2s running around everywhere in the format.
Yeah.
And 5 mana to turn this into a 3/5 flyer is not exciting. I think you will play this in blue green because you want to be exhausting in blue green,
Mhm.
and you will probably be able to do it for cheaper there, but I'm not excited about this card.
Sold. I agree. I'm with you.
Next up, we've got Glitch Ghost Surveyor. This is 2 and a blue for a common. It's 2/2 flying Spirit Scout with Start Your Engines, and once you hit max speed, you can pay 3 mana, exile this card from your graveyard to draw a card. We have a lot of these cards highlighted, and I assume it will be a similar conversation everywhere. You give us a 0, I give us a 4. I'm pretty high on this cycle. I think you're going to want to get your engine started. And if these cards incidentally do it by themselves over the course of the game, giving you an extra card in the late game when they die is good. And I especially like this one because it is an evasive threat. So if you can, on turn 3, play this, have attacked with your 2-drop, you're at 2. This is going to get you there over the course of the next 2 turns potentially because it's evasive. I think this card does a lot on its own.
I think the truth is somewhere in the middle for some of this cycle. I'm less I like the blue one in some ways the most because it's evasive and has like the most chance of like starting your engines and then continuing to get you up to max speed. I think blue is perhaps one of the colors least interested
In getting your max speed?
in
Yeah,
getting max speed.
I hear that.
And so after thinking about this cycle a bit more, I think the red and the white one jump out to me. The white one is a 2 mana 2/2 first strike on your turn. And the red one is a 3 mana 3/2 with trample. And I like those a lot because I think white and red are going to be like the Mardu stuff is wanting max speed. I think red black for sure, black white for sure, and red white incidentally will have some max speed stuff. The glitch ghost surveyor, I think isn't as synergistic as what some of the blue stuff is trying to do. Like if blue is all in on artifacts, I don't think glitch ghost surveyor gets in there at all.
You're right. I'm sold. I wasn't
Okay.
thinking about what blue wanted to do when I graded this card. I was just high on the cycle and annoyed
Yeah.
that you were giving the cycle a 0. I think
Yeah.
and wanted to argue about them, but you're right. I think this one is a 0 because it's blue, and I don't think blue cares about max speed that
Yeah.
much.
I think the white and the red one are 4s. The green one is a vanilla 3/3, right? And the black one is a 2/3 that can pump. I'm less jazzed about either of those, but I think black just will get a bump when you're in black white or black red because you're gonna want to be starting your engines and max speeding.
Yeah, I hear that. All right, next up, we've got another vanilla legendary, which is awesome that we're arguing about vanilla
Vanilla.
cards, like that they created cards that are interesting to evaluate. So we've got Kalorna Coral Tyrant. This is 1 and a blue for an uncommon. It's a 0/8 octopus, hashtag on brand with the 8 legs for that 8 defense. I
Oh,
gave us a 2.
good for you.
You gave us a 0.
I did give this a 0. What 2 decks do you like this in?
I like this in any defensive blue deck. So I think blue green is definitely going to want to get to the late game, and I think blue white is definitely going to want to get to the late game.
But it's not an artifact for blue white.
It's not an artifact for a blue white, but it's essentially a removal spell for whatever your opponent's big dumb creature on the ground is for 2 mana, and I like that. This is going to be annoying. Your opponent's going to play Kalorna. What are you going to do to it?
Okay, I'll go 2.
What are you going to do to it?
What are you going to do to it?
It's so huge.
It's a great question. Next up, we've got Scrounging Skyray, 1 and a blue for a 1/2 flyer at uncommon. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature, and it has cycling 2. I gave this a build around B-. You gave this a 1+. I'm down with 1+.
Well, it's interesting in that, like, I think we're kind of saying the same thing with our grades, but also representing how excited we are about the archetype with our grades.
Yes.
And I think you are more excited about blue-red than I am. Like, I think blue-red looks to be one of the worst decks in the format. And I think
say it ain't so. They did it again.
I think they did it again, but I'm sure DeFore will be crushing everyone with blue-red cycling within the first week of the format. But it looks so self-contained in a format that looks so broadly synergistic and so easily synergistic. Like, again, it feels like I expect blue-red to have to do work to do what red, white, and green, white just get to do easily. And then I also expect blue-red to have to do work to do stuff that is not as synergistically powerful as blue, white, and blue, black on the artifact end of the spectrum. I think I see it all there, like the synergy and stuff, but I also think there's going to be games where you play your 1/1 that grows and you play this and it's going to get removed, and then you're going to have a lot of cycling cards in your deck that don't really do that much.
All right, I'm down with 1+ and perhaps getting cooler on blue-red by the second.
All right, moving on to black. First up, we've got Deathless Pilot. This is 1 and a black for a 2/2 common zombie pilot. This one does crew mounts and vehicles of power were 2 or greater. And it's got 3 and a black. Return this card from your graveyard to your hand. You give us a 4. I give us a 2. The 2 are black, white, and black, green.
Black, white, and black, green. I could see it. And then black, red doesn't care about this as much. And black, blue, I get it not. Though black, red, and black, blue are going to have vehicles.
That is this good? Just the fact that your deck's going to have vehicles does not make me want Deathless Pilot.
This is the bug from Ikoria, but its return text is it's 1 mana cheaper. How can you not love it?
There's not sacrifice themes like there were in Ikoria.
Yeah.
I mean, black white's really happily going to play this, I think. That's the closest to attrition-y we get.
Yeah. All right, I'll go down to 2. I think that's fair.
All right, next up we've got Spin Out. This is 1 black, black for an instant, destroy target creature or vehicle. You give us a B-, I give us a 4. And I just want to talk about it because I don't think this pulls you into black. And I don't think this is one of the premium removal spells in the format. I just think Murder's washed. And I don't think black is particularly good either. And I think black means you're going to have to be deep into black. I don't love that card.
I don't think black is good either. So I'm assuming this didn't make your top 10 commons.
Did not make my top 10 commons.
It did make mine, and I could see it being wrong. The thing that is selling me is that I don't like black very much, and black is a tough ask. I could come down to 4, but then I got to revise my top 10 list. Okay.
I mean, you could have 9, and I'll have 11. I love.
You have 11?
No, I have 10. I was just saying I could add one easily to mine if you're having trouble.
Thank you so much. All right, I'll come down to 4, and I'll see if I can come up with a card I like. Could be this one. This next comment is Chitin Gravestalker, 5 and a black for a 5/4. Spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact and or creature card in your graveyard, and it has cycling 2. I gave this a 2. You gave this a 0. I think the obvious home for this is in black-green, that is graveyard stuff. I think black-red. Like, the fact that this is creatures and artifacts, and like your Grim Bauble gets in the bin, and red's got vehicles that are on the cheap that can get in there. I think this has a home. I don't think I'm not quite like it's Tolarian Terror, it's the common build around, whatever. Like, I'm not that excited about it, but I think there are decks where this can reasonably cost like 2 mana, and that's going to be good.
I agree. Ultimately, I just think it's low impact. That's why I gave it a 0. Like, I don't think your green black deck or your black red deck at the end of the draft, if you ask, it's the same thing you were saying. Like, I don't think at the end of the draft, if you ask, well, did you get 2 Chitin Gravestalkers? And if the answer is no, like, I think you're gonna be fine. But maybe
Yeah,
I'm wrong about that.
what I'm saying, I think that you will feel like, I wish I had a couple of those.
But aren't you also just gonna, I guess maybe that's why it's a 2, you're gonna get them. Because there's a very specific deck that wants this card, and it is atrocious for every other thing.
I think that is true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Okay.
you need to prioritize it, but I think it's got 2 good homes.
Okay, I'm in for that. I'm in for 2. Next up, we move on to the uncommons. We've got Hellish Sideswipe. This is black for a sorcery at uncommon. There's an additional cost to cast it. You sack an artifact or a creature to destroy target creature or vehicle. And if the sacrifice permanent was a vehicle, you draw a card. You give us a 4. I give us a 1.
What's the one? Black white?
Black white looks attrition-y to me, but I don't think there's great stuff to sacrifice running around.
Except Grimbauble.
Grimbauble. Yeah, Grimbauble's real good.
Grimbaubble's real good to sacrifice. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's definitely diminishing returns. Like, we're not in whatever final, I forget the card, in Duskmourn territory where you can just load up on them and there's, rooms and enchantments galore to sacrifice. I don't think we're there. But I feel like the first copy is just going to go in any black deck. And
I'd buy that the first copy is good in any black deck. That I would buy.
And I think to your point, probably the first copy is better than the first copy of Spin Out.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, excited to talk to you about this next card. Wretched Doll is 1 and a black for a 3/1 artifact creature toy. Has black, tap, surveil 1. I gave this a 1. You gave this a 4. I'd like to at least bump mine up to a 2, but I could see it being a 4. I sat with this card for a long time.
I just think it's a good card. I think as I was looking at the spoiler, there are not a lot of great 2-drops like that are good later when you draw them. There are a lot that you're fine with on turn 2. I think this one's relevant late in the game. I think it's insane in blue-black. I think black-green also really wants it to bin things into the graveyard potentially. I think it's just going to do work in black-red and black-white too. I think it is just a good Magic card.
I'm in. I'm in for 4 on Wretched Doll. Ooh, what a big gap we have for this next card. Our first big gap. What's going on here?
This is Gastel Raider. This is 2 and a black for an uncommon. It's a 2/1 vampire rogue with Start Your Engines. When it enters, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an instant or sorcery card from it. That player discards that card. And once you hit max speed, it gets +1/+1 and has menace. You give us a 0. I give us a B-.
I feel pretty strongly that this card is bad. I just don't like your opponent's going to have a handful of things that this nabs and in their deck. And when this misses, like I think Sin Collector was in Pioneer Masters and that was 1 white black and had this effect. It exiled the spell, I think, rather than discarded it, but whatever. And there were way more spells in that format. That card I was pretty dubious of there, but it was fine. This, I think there's going to be less targets for it. When this misses, it's horrible. Yes, it starts your engines, but it never has attacks. I just think this gets edged out a lot in this format.
The combo of Start Your Engines plus getting an instant or sorcery is so
when
good,
you hit,
I think.
When you hit, great. I just think you're going to miss like 75% of the time.
But I think the fact that this has Start Your Engines makes up for the miss to some extent. It's not like you played a 3-mana 2/1 like Sin Collector or something. I think that's where the difference is for me. I think I'm valuing that more than you are. And maybe it doesn't pull you into black. I would buy that. But it feels hard for me to not start this in every black deck except blue-black. Like maybe this is a 3.
Like as long as you're doing the Start Your Engines thing in black, which you very likely are because that's what black is doing a lot of the time, you're just going to play this because of that.
Yeah, I'm in for this being a 3, I think, after talking about it.
I just feel like the first time I miss with this, I'm just going to be like, nope, never again. I'm done.
Well, you'll have to see how much you like the Start Your Engines aspect of it.
Yeah,
then, right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, next up, we've got Wickerfolk Indomitable. This is 3 and a black for an uncommon 4/3 artifact creature. It's a scarecrow. You can cast this card from your graveyard by paying 2 life and sacrificing an artifact or creature in addition to paying its other costs. I gave this a 3. You gave us a 0. I like this card a lot. I think blue-black is happily going to play this. And I think black-white and black-red also really want this card.
What are you sacrificing? Like, to your point about Hellish Sideswipe, like...
Grimbauble, baby?
Grim Bobble's got a lot. Really, Grim Bobble's back is going to be breaking with how many of Black's cards it's having to
Trying to hold up, prop
hold
up.
up.
Yeah. There's some treasure running around a little bit. I think you might be able to sandbag a treasure token.
I see it being like, I'll play it if I end up in all of those things, but I'm never missing this, and I'm never picking it highly. I just think like this card is so medium to me.
I agree with all of that. So maybe it's a 0 and that it just doesn't matter. Like, I don't feel like any of the decks it goes in really want it.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay. I'm in for it being a 0 then.
We got another big gap here in Risen Necro Regent. It's 4 and a black for a 5/4 with start your engines and max speed at the beginning of your end step. Create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. I gave this a build around B. You gave this a 2. This is
and my 2 would be black, white, black, red.
Makes sense. I guess then in your framework, I would at least give it a 2+. I think those are the two decks that want it the most. I think those are the decks that will be starting your engines a lot. But this is a card that I'm like, oh, cool. Once I have this, I want to take every instance of start your engines that I can get my hands on.
So to try to clarify how good it is, we keep referencing Grim Bobble, which is an insane card in the format, which is black for an artifact. When it ETBs, a creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Then you can pay 2 black, tap it, and sacrifice it to Surveil 2. I think I'm taking Grim Bobble over Risen Necro Regent, pack 1, pick 1.
I agree. So then maybe Bobble should be a B+ for me.
Yeah, Bobble's nuts. But I also think like Risen Necro Regent is more of a reward for getting into black, white, and black, red than it is. I'm picking Risen Necro Regent and I am trying to start my engines. That's how I'm viewing the card.
Okay. And that I could see that. I'm going to start on the side of liking it enough. Like,
to want to do the thing. Yeah.
To want to do the thing. Because if you cast this, make a 2/2 and threaten to make a 2/2 every turn, that's so good.
It's a good card for 5 mana,
yeah.
All right, it takes us on to red commons, where we've got Dynamite Diver. This is red for a 1/1. It's a pilot, so it crews things as though its power were 2 greater, and when it dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. You give us a 4, I give us a 2.
I just really like this card. I think I just think this, I think without the crew vehicles as though its power were 2 or greater text, I still really like this card. It's just 1 mana 1/1 pings something when it dies, but then plus the fact that this can crew or saddle larger things or things with larger requirements. I think this is just good.
Yeah, I think this is also just a good card. Its best homes are red, black, and red, white. Correct?
Yeah.
And then like, are you really playing this in red, blue?
I think so.
And red, green? Like red, green wants to stomp and beat down.
Yeah, but some of that stomping and beating
down is through vehicles.
Is through vehicles and mounts, and this helps that.
Yeah, it's going to get the game started on turn 1. It's going to play defense really well, too.
Right, that's the thing is like when you're on the draw in best of 1, and this is your turn 1 play, and facing down your opponent's 2 mana 3/1, like, I think this is just really good. Can't wait to talk about this card, because I got my ammunition all ready, baby. Burner Rocket, 1 and a red 3/1 vehicle with flash. When it enters, target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains trample until end of turn, and it has crew 1. I gave this a 4, you gave this a 1. I have 2 words for you.
Okay.
Actually, I have 4 words for you.
Okay.
Format All-Star Rimrock Knight.
No, God, no.
It's the same card. It's the trick. It's got the adventure, and then it's a 2 mana 3/1 with some finicky stuff. It's the same card.
No.
Here's the thing. Well, I don't know what you're saying no about. That's an
this is Rimrock Knight that people are gonna like this card, and I'm gonna have to rage about it all format long. No.
The thing that I keep coming back to about this card is my thought about common and uncommon vehicles kind of getting edged out a little bit, just because of that pinch on non-creature, non-removal in your deck.
This is a vehicle and a combat trick.
That's true, right? So I like it a little bit more, but I ultimately think you're probably closer with 1 or maybe even 0 as just like I think this might be a 0 where you're like, yeah, this is my 21st card in a lot of red decks, and that's fine. But I never need to pick it highly, and I won't miss it. Your 1 is for red, white?
Red, white. I think maybe it's a 2. I think red, green also would pretty happily play it.
+2/+0 and trample is good for red, black, too, for getting max speed through things.
I don't think this is a good Magic card.
You are predisposed. You do not like this kind of card, much like I don't like the 4 mana artifact, give your whole team +0/+1 vigilance. Like, I don't see that card usually. I feel like this is a card you miss on.
I agree that I am predisposed to dislike a card like this, but I also think this card is fundamentally different from Rimrock Knight in a few ways, in that its trick is 2 mana and not 1 mana. So I think the
Mhm.
turn that you spend it as a trick, you are unlikely to still be able to double spell. And I think that matters. And it also isn't a body on its own, which matters. Like Rimrock Knight helps you flood the board with
Mhm.
pressure. This does not do that very well. And I think it's a non-creature in an aggro deck that's going to want a lot of creatures. Burner Rocket as a 4 is a really tough sell for me. I think this is a very low powered Magic the Gathering card ultimately. And I think you're going to have to really be aggressive to win it.
I think it's either a 4 or a 0. I think this is either going to emerge as like a sleeper common, let's say. Like, I don't think it's on the top commons list, but I could see it being in the short list of top 20, top 25 commons in the format, or it just not mattering at all.
I'm in for it not mattering at all. I think that is much
I
more
know you
likely
are.
than it being on a short list for sleeper commons or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, next up we've got Endrider Catalyzer. This is 1 red for a 3/1 human warrior with start your engines. Once you hit max speed, it gives you red. You give us a 0, I give us a 4. Here are my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Red's 2-drops are largely not great, in my opinion. And I think this is one that stands out as going to hit hard, play defense well with 3 power, and get the engine started in what red, white, and red, black are really going to want that. Red, green is fine with this. I mean, I think red, blue largely not a deck, so doesn't really matter.
I'm in for 2, even 2+ on End Rider Catalyzer. I think too low. Like, I agree. Red, white, and red, black are going to want start your engines, and once you want that, you just want as many instances of it as possible.
Right, and you have to pick Endrider Catalyzer over Burner Rocket, right? You're never taking Burner Rocket ahead of Endrider Catalyzer.
I really, I don't know. I really don't know. I think in blue red, you're definitely taking Rocket over it, but maybe you don't care about either
Why are you taking Burner Rocket over it in blue red?
because it's an artifact.
Does blue red care about artifacts?
Doesn't blue care about artifacts?
Yeah, but that's why I think blue red's terrible, because I don't think red really cares
Because
about
blue cares
artifacts,
about
and
artifacts,
you
red
don't get to
doesn't.
play the signpost. Like the whole reason to do artifacts is because the blue black and blue white
Yeah.
artifact payoffs are insane as the signposts, and if you carve out that space for yourself, you're gonna get them late because nobody else can use them.
Yeah. I'm very curious about both of these 2 drops. I don't know,
Well, yeah,
man.
one of these cards has the headliner mechanic for the format on them. The other does
Right.
not.
That's true. That's true. I think Marauding Mako will be a similar conversation as the blue uncommon that we talked about that cares about cycling. So I'm fine to concede prematurely, but we can read it. Single red 1/1. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, you put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature. And as cycling 2, I gave it another build around B. You gave it a 1+, and I am fine to come down to 1+. I think thinking about this card as a reward rather than a reason makes sense to me.
Next up, we've got Reckless Velocitar. This is 3 and a red for a 3/3 uncommon pilot. When it saddles a mount or crews a vehicle during your main phase, that mount or vehicle gets +2/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. You gave us a 0. I gave us a 2. I think this is going to be pretty darn good in red, white, and green, white. This is combat professor that gives +2/+0 and trample.
To only a few things, like maybe in red green, your deck's not gonna be full of mounts and vehicles. What happens when this is Hill Giant? And I know that's my whole deal, is all I think about is the floors of cards and not their ceilings. So I'm recognizing that, but I just think I just want my 4 drops in those aggressive decks to stand on their own more than be synergistic and have the synergy be intrinsic synergy, like just like it happens to happen, rather than I played this and now my vehicle that was already large is +2/+0 and trample. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, maybe something we need to think about. I feel like we keep coming back to pick orders somehow. Like in the numbers, like when we have differences, a lot of times it's you put a 0 because you're not expecting to have to pick it highly, and maybe you'll play it, and I put a 2 because I'm seeing the homes where it goes, but also agree that it's not going to be picked highly. In which case, maybe it is a 0 just then. If you're not having to spend a high pick on it, if we're trying to highlight the cards that matter,
yeah,
I think this card is closer to 0 than a 2.
that's what I think.
So I'm conceding.
The next card I sat with for a long time. What's going on here?
This is Spire Mech Cycle. This is 4 and a red for an uncommon vehicle. It's a 5/4 with haste. It's got a crew cost of 2. It also has exhaust. Tap another untapped mount or vehicle you control. This vehicle becomes an artifact creature. Put a +1/+1 counter on it for each mount and or vehicle you control other than this vehicle. I give this a B minus, moved down from a B. You gave us a 1, and I bumped it down because I didn't have it in my top red uncommon somehow. But I still think this card is nuts.
That's just because red is very good.
Red's uncommons are great, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think this is at worst, this is a 5-mana 6/5 haste most of the time.
No, you're always going to have a mount or a vehicle in play when you cast this.
Most of the time? I assume I'm going to have a vehicle on the battlefield most of the time.
Don't think that's true.
That's
How
fair.
many vehicles are you putting in your deck?
10, baby.
You're putting like...
That was a joke. That was a joke. I'm just trying to tilt you.
It worked.
But this one's exceptional. So okay,
right.
at worst a 5/4 haste, but it gets a +1/+1 counter when you exhaust it. No, it is at minimum a 6/5.
But you have to have a mount or a vehicle.
For it to get the +1/+1 counter. Okay, you're right. At worst, a 5/4.
At worst, it's a 5-mana 5/4 vehicle with crew 2. That's its floor, which is fine. When you exhaust this, like the turn you play it, exhaust it. It's a 6/5, a 7/6, whatever, and it's got haste. That is going to hit like an absolute truck. I don't think you're picking this like a build around. I don't think you're picking this going after red aggressively. Much like I think we were talking about the cycling cards, I would think about this more as a... I mean, give it a 1 as for just red white, but I could see it also for red
green also wants it, yeah.
I think red green also, yeah. So maybe it's a 2 plus. But I think it's more of a reward, for lack of a better word, than it is I'm going after it like it's a B.
So you think I'm giving too much credit to how often you're going to have a mount or a vehicle? That's your argument?
This is a great time to chat about these types existing in the format.
Okay.
Vehicles, there's a lot. There's 26 at common or uncommon, but I also don't think a lot of those are going to end up mattering. That's one of my takes, is that I think a lot of your focus on vehicles is going to be in the rare and mythic department. So I'm not sure how many of the common or uncommon ones are going to matter. Mounts, there's only 10. So there's just not a lot of mounts, and there are not going to be a lot of vehicles in your deck. You're going to have like 4 or 5 vehicles in your deck. And this will be one of them.
So if I've got 3 other vehicles, let's say, and 3 mounts,
3 other, yeah,
that's like 6 sources for this to be online.
Mm-hmm. You have to be happy with your whole board being tapped that turn, and
yeah, I'm okay. I'm in for this being a 2. I think you're right.
2 plus is fine.
Doesn't pull me into red. Ultimately, I agree.
Yeah, you will probably successfully talk me down on this next card. Dracosaur Auxiliary, 4 red for a 4/4 dinosaur dragon mount. It is flying in haste, saddle 3, and when it attacks while saddled, it deals 2 damage to any target. Give this a B minus, you gave this a 2.
This is when I messaged you. These cards were hard to grade. Right here in these red uncommons. It was while I was looking at Dracosaur Auxiliary. And the other thing I kept doing this format that I never do is I always hide your column, because usually you grade first.
Uh-huh.
And I usually wait until the end to look. So many times I would grade a card, unhide your column to see what you gave it, and then immediately rehide it because I wanted to see. This is such a hard format to evaluate.
Yes.
Yeah, so Volcanic Dragon's back. This is great when you saddle it.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately,
it's not that bad when you don't saddle it.
It's not even that bad when you don't saddle it, but it's 6 mana.
It is 6 mana.
I think red-green definitely wants this card. Red-black probably does. Red-white probably. Like, red-green, red-white are probably its best homes. Red-blue doesn't, I don't think. Like, red-blue's super linear. And red-black, I don't know that it really wants this. That's what I was trying to decide, is like, is this just a good card? That was the issue I was having, and I still don't know the answer to that question.
This seems kind of insane to me. But it is 6 mana, but it does a lot.
It does a lot.
If you can saddle it, the turn it comes into play, that's such a huge swing.
I agree. I don't know the answer to this question. It reads really well to me, but I'm just worried that it's going to be 6 mana and then not impactful enough.
Do you have thoughts right now about power versus synergy in this format?
Yeah, I think much like the colors existing on a spectrum, I think the decks are going to exist on a spectrum. Like I expect the data to say that Naya is where it's at, and but I also like last week I was kind of down on the format ish, like going into it, wondering is it going to be truly max speed, because I don't love those kind of formats. But I think the artifact stuff is powerful enough that I think those two poles are going to be fighting each other. I think there is going to be synergy, build around stuff in the artifact space, fighting against just cards beating you down in the Naya space. And I think those two are going to be close. I think both are going to exist in the format, and I think that looks cool.
Yeah. This just seems like one of the more raw power things to do at non-rare to me.
I agree, but also like the red decks that are going to be good, I think are so fast. Like, are they really going to care about having a 6-drop at the top of the curve?
Yeah, maybe not.
You're always picking Lightning Strike over this, correct? 1 in a red, deal 3 to any target, pack 1, pick 1.
Correct.
Are you picking Dynamite Diver over at pack 1, pick 1? That's your single red 1/1 that crews things 2 or greater. Like, I think that's kind of close. Maybe, or maybe it's just always a slam dunk. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like it feels like it will be clear. And if I have to say, I guess I choose the 1-drop over the 6-drop.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I don't know.
It's a really hard one for me.
Yeah, well, this whole format. It's tough. Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes. So you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you.
Factor's the pre-con of the food world. The meals arrive fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle.
With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto.
Reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat.
I really love to cook, but that doesn't mean that I always have the time to, or more importantly, that I always want to, which is why Factor is such a great option to have on hand. For a night when I want to relax, or lunch the next day, like right after we record today, there's not enough leftovers, Factor helps keep me fed with delicious, well-balanced meals.
Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LOL50off and use code LOL50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping.
That's code LOL50off at factormeals.com/LOL50off to get 50% plus free shipping on your first box. And now back to the show.
All right, it takes us on to green. We have no answers for you.
I mean, we don't like, what are we going to do? Keep arguing our own little bubble opinion at each other? Like, we got to move on at some point.
All right, Stampeding Scurryfoot up first. This is green for a common. It's a 1/1 mouse. It's got exhaust for 3 and a green. Mouses classically morphing into bigger creatures. You put a +1/+1 counter on this, and it creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. You gave it a B-. I gave it a 2.
What's the 2?
I think blue-green and red-green as the 2 exhaust decks. I mean, I don't think green-white or green-black is going to particularly care about this card.
Interesting. This just strikes me as a good card.
It does nothing until you exhaust it.
What, Cruise and Saddles?
I guess.
I don't know. I'm like 5 mana, 3/3 and a 2/2 with synergy in installments. That just, I don't know, it seems like a good card to me.
Yeah, I think you're going to quite happily play it in red, green, and blue, green that care about exhausting. I can't imagine putting this in a green black deck or a green white deck. Like, green white's going to want the white 1/1 Saddler way more than this, and green black's just going to have better stuff to do with its mana late in the game, assuming it makes it there. I think this looks like a synergy card to me, rather than like, I think you're evaluating it as, this seems fine.
Yeah,
I think I'm seeing it as a synergy card.
Interesting. I'm assuming, again, did not make your top 10 commons.
No, not even close. Not even on my sleeper cards list. For me. Maybe I'm too low.
Yeah, I just like this card. I have nothing to say other than I like it. And I feel like I'm going to play it in every green deck.
This seems like the blue 1/3 flyer to me that exhausts into a 3/5.
Yeah, this just seems way better to me because it's 2 bodies.
Yeah. That's fair.
Interesting. I keep my eye on this one for sure.
Next up, Jabiric Omnivore. You're going to keep your eye off this one. This card is atrocious. 1 and a green for a beast at common. It's a 3/2. You give us a 4. I give us a 0. This card's garbage.
So, okay, can we talk about this in conjunction with one of the uncommons that we disagree on?
Sure.
Fang Druid Summoner. 3 and a green for a 2/4 with reach. When it enters, you may search your library and or graveyard for a creature card with no abilities. Reveal it and put it into your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle. So this searches up, there's the cycle of uncommon vanilla creatures, and then green gets this additional vanilla 2-mana 3/2.
I hadn't put that together. Makes me like it slightly more. Maybe it's a 1 if you have Fang Druid Summoner, but I also don't think Fang Druid Summoner is good enough to go out of your way for.
Well, I don't think you have to go out of your way for it. But I think Fang Druid Summoner is a good pick because you can get, you're either going to get one of the uncommons or you get this. And the fact that, I would like Fang Druid Summoner a lot less if it only tutored it out of your library. But the fact that this can be dead, you trade off the Omnivore and then this can just get it back out of the yard. I think that's good. 2-mana 3/2 is good, buddy. What are you doing? It's a 0.
So, no, it's fine. Whatever. It's a vanilla card in 2025. What decks want Fang Druid Summoner? I would argue that green-white does not. I would argue that red-green does not. I think green-blue really does, and I think green-black really does. I think green-white and green-red are going to beat down hard enough that they don't care about accruing that sort of value.
I don't. I am not ascribing as much, and I believe green-white, at least as far as WotC is concerned, is mid-range. And red-green.
Yeah, and then red, they printed Allegor, or whatever it's called, Lagorin, Soul of Alacria.
Yeah.
Mid-range my butt.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know. I think Jabiric Omnivore is better than, I don't know. I think it's definitely better than a 0. I just feel like it's like a card you're going to be like, oh, I'm in green. Cool. Taking this good 2-mana 3/2, and then vice versa, the Fang Druid Summoner just being like, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing these decks as hyper aggressive as you are, I think. But that could be wrong.
That's fair. I'll keep my eye on it. I had not put together the Fang Guardian getting a common to go search up. I had not put that together.
Pothole Mole, baby.
Pothole Mole. They got me again.
They get you every time. This is 2 and a green 2/3. When it enters mill 3, then you can return a land from your graveyard to your hand. A 1 on my side versus a B- on your side.
Listen,
how do you reconcile Mr. Green, white, and green, red are going to beat down so hard with my pothole mole?
I know. I thought about this a lot.
I bet you did.
I wanted to make a point. My B- here, and it goes back to format all-star burner rocket, which is, I think, in the modern Magic age, we get a little bit lost in synergy card evaluations or maxing card evaluations, and and you're championing the floor of cards, and I lose that a little bit. But this is the type of card that I champion the floor of. Pothole Mole as 3-mana 2/3, draw you a land 95% of the time while also having synergy with other stuff, is an insanely intrinsically powerful Magic card compared to something like Burner Rocket that's like you're hoping to land it and pressure the opponent and have your draw line up perfectly until they die. And I agree that you are not playing Pothole Mole in green-white or green-red, but I think it is so good in green-blue and green-black that it pulls me into green, and then I want to draft those decks as a result. This is just a great Magic card. I was thinking about this while I was listening to the LR Sunset show for Duskmorn, and they were talking about Glimmerburst having been the top blue common or whatever. The 3 and blue instant, make a 1/1, draw 2 cards. And I remember being super high on that card. And then well, is it enough? Does it do enough? Is it synergistic? Can you draw cards in 2025? And just the answer is no. That's a good Magic card. And I think the answer to Pothole Mole is it's a good Magic the Gathering card.
But it wasn't in OTJ.
That's because stats ruled the format. Yes. But I still, I will defend this card until the end of time as being an intrinsically good Magic card.
So one of the things, can I get a temperature check on how excited you are about the 2 decks you think Pothole Mole goes in, which is blue-green and black-green.
Stop. That's really bad.
That's a tough.
Don't ask me that question.
That's a tough question, right? Because
I don't like
black
either of them. The
black-green looks
answer,
bad to me.
yeah,
Black-green looks
the answer is I don't really like either of them. If you put me on the spot,
yeah. And so I don't think this will end up pulling you into green. If that's what you think, if you're like, this will be great in these 2 decks that I don't like,
that is kind of what I think.
it's a tough sell for me, buddy. I don't think this card is going to, I think it might just be because OTJ has been back on Arena this week and I've played it, half a dozen times. But this set is reminding me of that a little bit. And Pothole Mole feels like good card without a good home to me.
I'm steadfast in my B minusness.
Okay.
I think Pothole Mole's great.
Next up, we got Molt Tender. This is single green for a 1/1 at uncommon. Tap to mill a card, tap to exile a card from your graveyard, add 1 mana of any color. Give this a 4, you gave this a 1. You think this is just good in green-black?
I think this is just good in green-black. I don't think it ramps you quickly enough or efficiently enough to be good anywhere else.
I guess it's pretty mopey in green-red and green-white.
It's an atrocious top deck. Like, think about how bad it felt top decking Llanowar Elves in Foundations.
Yeah. All right, I'll go 2. I think this plays in blue-green too, probably. But I'll go 2.
All right, next up we've got Plow Through. Green for a sorcery. At uncommon, target creature you control fights target creature an opponent controls or destroy target vehicle. You give us a 0, I give us a 4. This card is crazy efficient. When you kill a vehicle that your opponent spent 4 mana on for 1 mana, plus this has the upside of green stuff is just big. You're going to be able to randomly prey upon things. I would not like this card this much if it didn't have the destroy an artifact text or destroy a vehicle text. I guess it's not straight up destroy an artifact, but this is, I think, oozes gaining back lots of tempo, and I'm willing to risk prey upon being a little awkward for the upside of being able to blow up vehicles.
So compare this to Bushwhack, which is the fight spell and the buyout is go find a land.
Mm-hmm.
Bushwhack is better. Oh, wait. Okay. Is Bushwhack not better?
I don't think so, because I think Bushwhack does not consistently get to trade up on mana, and I think this card pretty consistently does.
And I'm not happy about Prey Upon in 2025. The thing that this card makes me think more about the format is that I'm just lower on vehicles. Like, I just want my vehicles to really matter versus being excited about this card.
But aren't you talking about these banger rare and mythic vehicles that then this is going to be able to answer for a single green?
Yeah, that's a lot. That's very good.
That's a great insurance policy on what is already a fine card. Like, Prey Upon is not a bad card. It's a fine card.
Is it? Is Prey Upon a fine card now? Is fight with no, sorcery speed fight with no power and toughness boost? I don't think that's that's where we're different, I think. I don't think that's a good card. I think if Prey Upon were printed in this set, it would be a 0.
I agree.
And so then we're just evaluating it as, but how much better is being able to blow up 4 of your cards, maybe?
I think people are going to be, 4 to 5 vehicles, sure.
But not in every deck.
But potentially 4 to 5 bombs. Like, if you're saying that the vehicles you're playing are going to be good cards, I want a card that answers your best 4 or 5 cards for a single green, while also like the buyout of Prey Upon. I agree. I like this card significantly less if it is Prey Upon, but I think I value the destroy target vehicle much higher than you.
Yeah, and I think that's where the rub is, and I think just remains to be seen. That takes us on to Fang Guardian, which is 3 and a green for a 4/2 at uncommon with flash. And when it enters, another target creature or vehicle you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. I gave this a B, you gave this a 2. This is reminding me a lot of Downwind Ambusher from Bloomburrow. The 4 and a black 4/2 flash, give a thing -1/-1, or finish off a thing that got dealt damage. I think this card is just gonna be a 2-for-1 a lot of the time.
Well, this is not nearly that versatile. The Downwind Ambusher could be used defensively also. This is an offensive only card. This can be used defensively. I guess. Yeah. Sure, it can, but it's not nearly as effective as Downwind Ambusher as a defensive card. Yeah, that's how I was viewing it, as offensive only, and so ergo it only wants to go in green, white, and red, green, and I don't think green blue or green black is going to be particularly happy to play this card. Certainly not green blue. Green black maybe just because it's a body also wrapped up in a trick, and green black wants as many bodies as possible.
I
I agree.
guess
This card is crazy powerful.
I think this card is good. I am seeing the format, and maybe there'll be certain decks. This is going back to the question I asked you about synergy versus power. I am seeing this format slightly less synergistic than you, I think, and that's why I'm
Okay.
like just looking at this card and being like, this card just looks good, and is gonna be good in my green decks. Versus like, well, I want to make sure that my green XX, like, I just think this is good. You're going to be tussling in combat, and this helps you win that combat and leaves you a 4/2.
Yeah, I'm in. I do think this card is very powerful. So for
Yeah.
what it's worth, I think you're closer to right than I am. I'll come up to B minus. Another vanilla card here. They did it again. Tarian World Tyrant. Scary Terry, as I'm sure he will be known. This is 2 GGG for a 9/7 vanilla uncommon legendary. You give us a 4, I give us a 0. Come on. You're never. It's triple green.
Bruh.
And you're going to say it's gigantic.
It is. I'm going to say, let me do it. Bro, it's gigantic. I am going to be curving my Fang Druid Summoner, tutor up Tarian World Tyrant, turn 5, play Terry. Like, it's so big.
It's so big.
It's so big. Like, I know that's like an argument, but like, that's so much. 16 power and toughness for 5 mana. That's so big.
It is so big. I agree. Like, what do you argue against that? I can't tell you it's not that big. So it's very difficult to win the argument because it is so big.
It's either a 4 or a 0. So I agree with that. I don't think it's like, well, it's sometimes it's whatever.
I'm reading these trashy fantasy books right now that my brother got me. It's called the genre is called lit RPG, and it's like essentially you're reading a story, but like the character. There's also like some Dungeons-y Dragons-y stuff in there, and the character currently has like tons of points in strength, like 54 strength or something, and only 19 dexterity. I feel like this creature is that. Like it's all strength, but you're gonna be able to go around it. You're gonna be able to chump block it. You're gonna be able to whatever. It is gonna be great with Fang Druid Summoner when you can afford triple green and cast it on curve. But there's no guarantees of triple green to cast it on curve.
That's the thing is like, and to my point that I make a lot with these differences is you never have to pick it highly, and you're probably never, unless you have Fang Druid Summoner, you're never gonna miss it. So
yes,
0 is if it's a 0 or 4, it's probably a 0.
Thank you.
All right, takes us on to some artifacts here. First up is Ticket Tortoise. Is this the golden egg? 2 mana, 3/1 with Defender. When it enters, if an opponent controls more lands than you make a treasure token. I gave this a 0. You gave this a 2.
This is definitely not the golden egg, but I think blue, white, and blue, black are both happily going to play this card. The fact that it is creature, artifact on curve, and then some amount of the time it's giving you 2 artifacts. I think blue, white, and blue, black are both interested in this.
I'm in for 2. That makes sense to me.
Next up, we've got Aether Jacket. This is 3 mana for a 2/1 flying Vigilance Thopter, and you can pay 2, tap it, and sacrifice it to destroy another target artifact. Activate only as a sorcery. Again, I think blue, white, and blue, black are going to be looking for playable artifacts. This is like borderline playable. It's not great, but I think you're going to have to play this in blue, white, and blue, black some amount of the time. I don't love it. Maybe it's a 0.
Yeah, this is a harder sell for me than the tortoise.
That's fair. I also agree this is a tougher sell. It's closer to a 0 than not. This next one, though, I do like. This is Camera Launcher. 3 mana for a colorless 2/2 construct, and it's got Exhaust for 3. Put a +1/+1 counter on it, and create a 1/1 Thopter artifact creature token with flying. It's like clunky, but I think if you can afford the clunk, or you get to the point where you do get to exhaust this, I think it turns into a pretty reasonable Magic the Gathering card. Like 3 in installments is not the worst. And I like the fact that you can play it and then the following turn exhaust it. Like your blue-green deck might want it. I doubt red-green does. And then I also think blue, white, and blue, black are gonna play this card.
Because it has the potential to make multiple artifacts.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in for 2 on Camera Launcher. You got me on 2 out of the 3 there.
All right. Love it.
Okay, no lands to disagree on, so let's chat about some multicolor uncommons, and then maybe that leads us into our discussion about the archetypes as a whole and where we think they're gonna pan out against each other.
Yeah. So first up, we've got Thundering Broodwagon, 2 black, green for an uncommon 6/5 vehicle. It's crew 3. It's also got cycling 2 for menace and reach vehicle, and when it enters, destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls with mana value 4 or less. You give this a 1. I give this a B. This card is strong.
Yeah, it is strong. And that's basically all you can do with the multicolor cards is either give them ones, I guess 1 pluses, and then they're in the
Or
B
pull
range.
you into their color.
Right.
Like, and I think green-black is going to be bad. But if green-black does anything, it's going to be because you're going to get this card late. And, like, it also has cycling. Like, it could very easily be what it is without cycling,
probably
too.
the best version of this is just getting it out of your hand because it's
Stop.
2 black, black, green, green. I don't know, man. This is a tough sell for me. Like, I think I agree with you that if you find yourself in black, green, one of the benefits will be getting this late. That is not a B. A B means, ooh.
A B for benefit.
Pack 1, pick 4. Someone passed me a Thundering Broodwagon. Oh, great. Let me get rid of my middling blue cards and I'm in. You're never doing that with this card.
All right, you win. It's a 1.
Next up, Cloudspire Sky Cycle is 2 red, white for a 2/3 vehicle with flying. It has crew 1, and when it enters, you distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 other vehicles and or creatures you control. I gave this a 1. You gave this a B.
This card's really good and going to be backbreaking when you curve into it in red-white. Does do the thing where it comes down, like pushes damage.
Well, I'm also I'm putting myself in the pack 1, pick 4. I have 3 blue cards, and I see this. Like 3, common blue cards. I see this.
That's tougher. I don't know if you are willing to abandon ship for this.
I think this gives you... One of the things I like about this card is you don't need much more, like besides commons. The commons are going to support this.
Correct.
It doesn't feel like you need higher rarity things to have a good red-white deck. And so when I see this 4th or 5th, I think I'm happy to spec on it.
But we're going back to the issue of, and this is again a broader conversation, maybe, but like when we're rating these things, I think what you think about Thundering Broodwagon. I don't think I'm abandoning ship to get into this when I see it 4th pick or 5th pick or whatever. But I think when I'm in red white, its power level is that of a B. Like, I think it's a very good card when I'm in red white.
But grades are for drafting. That's what grades are for. Grades are for when am I picking this card? Not how good is this going to be in its respective archetype.
Then I think this is like a 1 +++++++.
Great. Okay. Next up, Voyage Home. Wow. Okay. This is 5 white, blue for a sorcery, affinity for artifact. You draw 3 cards and gain 3 life. I gave this a 1. You gave this a build around B+. And you're just, I think, more excited about blue white than I am.
Yes. And I think blue artifacts in general than you are.
Yes. Which was weird because I like blue. I think blue looks good. Blue is, I think, best color, second best color for me.
But you have to like artifacts if you like blue.
I guess the thing that I am having a hard time seeing is what my good artifacts are that are making this cheaper, that aren't a bunch of 3 mana and 4 mana vehicles.
I think one of the cards that you're going to consistently get late that is excellent for this archetype is the Voyager Quick Welder, I think it's called, the 2 and a white 2/4 that makes your artifacts cost 1 less. That you're going to be able to get late. That's a good body. And then that also makes all the other mopey artifacts that you're going to have to play so much more playable. Like, imagine if those artifacts we talked about that were like begrudgingly playable, all of a sudden instead of costing 3, cost 2 or 1. I think you're going to be able to, after playing that card, hopefully if you build your deck right, vomit your hand and then refuel up with this blue-white uncommon that you're going to get every copy of because nobody else can use it.
Yes. I mean, it is extremely powerful. And there's not a lot of 2-for-1s, it feels like, in the format. And so a cheap 3-for-1 like this. Yeah. All right.
And all you have to do is get this down to costing, what, 3, 4? Like 3, it's insane. 4, it's good. And when it's 2, you're just winning. It's so hard.
Yeah. This, and in my head of like, I think this format is more powerful than synergistic, but sometimes you're not going to get the power. And this gives you power from, like, if you do the things, if you jump through the hoops, it's not like you're the cycling. The problem the cycling deck has is like the hoops you're jumping through is to make your 2 mana 1/2 grow or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. That gets
That
answered by a single removal spell.
yeah,
This is very resilient as a strategy, I think.
correct. Okay, I'm in for build around something in the B plus range.
Jonah agrees.
Jonah does agree. He is amped about Voyage Home.
Next up, we've got Haunt the Network. This is 3 blue black for an uncommon. Choose target opponent. Create 2/1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. Then the chosen player loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of artifacts you control. You give us a B minus. I give us a B plus. I've got 2 words for you.
I know what they
Zenith
are.
Flare.
I'm in. B plus is fine. I have set review fatigue. I concede.
Let's go.
We got to talk about this next one. Sky Serpent Seeker, green blue for a 1/1 with flying and death touch. And it has exhaust 4. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal 2 land cards. Put those land cards onto the battlefield tapped and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. I give this a 1+. You gave this a B+. And there was some, I think Samp in our Discord was quite high on blue green just based off of its signposts. I am less so. Like, and it's interesting. Like, I gave the other green blue signpost a 1. You gave it a B minus. You gave this one a B plus. You talk to me about this and green blue because I feel like I'm just missing something.
Yeah, I think this card is insanely pushed as far as rate goes. Like, this feels oblivious bookwormish to me, or name whatever blue green. Like, this is following the mold of busted single blue single green gold uncommon for blue green. I think you're happy for 2 mana 1/1 flying death touch. That's strong, and then it draws you like ramp 2 lands for 4 mana, and blue green has great places to put all of that mana, and then it turns it into a 2/2 flying death touch. Not that that's super relevant, but it's not nothing. I think this card is just very efficient as a Magic the Gathering card.
One of the things that again, part of my feeling about the format right now is that I think raw power exists, and I am less jazzed about the signpost uncommons as a whole because I don't want to get pigeonholed too early in a color pair. But that may end, like, there's obviously going to be some of them that are worth going after early and worth supporting early, and I could definitely see this being one for sure.
This has to be one. Like, think about the play pattern of, okay, so let's say you play this for 2 mana. It's insane on the play, right? But let's even say that you're on the draw. So you're on the back foot. You play this for 2 mana. You don't want to trade it off. You play your 3-drop, you block or whatever. Turn 4, you're going to be able to block, kill something, and then exhaust this to get 2 lands, untap, and have 7 mana available to you. Like, the play patterns with this card, I think, are super strong.
You can't exhaust this into 4 open mana from your opponent.
You get the exhaust effect even if they lightning strike this, right? Yes. You're not like putting a counter on this or something. Once you exhaust it, it's exhausted.
You'll get the lands.
You get the lands. I disagree. I think you are doing that play pattern.
All right, so you just get it no matter what. That is better.
Yeah, I think this card, this is like a 3-for-1 for 2 mana. And then an installment of ramping you, which is something that blue-green wants to do.
Okay, I'm in for this being in the B range. All right, what are we doing?
We're talking about archetype power rankings, baby.
Okay, talk to me.
So you had a list and you said, I don't feel strongly about it. And I looked at your list and I was like, well, I do feel strongly about it because, I love a good ranking. I love a good list.
I do.
So my archetype power rankings are kind of what we've discussed throughout this whole card evaluation thing, and tying back into your idea of there being 2 poles of the formats of artifacts and or raw power. Like, maybe that's a way to phrase it, or artifacts and creatures, however you want to think about it. But I think the ends of that spectrum are going to be the tier 1 decks in the format. I think blue, black, and blue, white on one end of the spectrum, and then green, white, and red, white on the other end of the spectrum, representing the raw power, the raw creatures. Tier 2, I've got like the start your engine stuff in the middle, white, black, red, green, and blue, green, being the exhaust color pairs. And the decks that I am less excited about are the ones that, again, that are more self-contained and don't touch on those other things, which are blue, red cycling and green, black.
I love it. I have no notes.
No notes. All right.
I was higher on blue red going into this episode, but the more we've talked about it and looked at things, I am less. I think it was mostly just a hope. I was like, blue red's got to get there this time, right? But I am a little skeptical. I don't think it'll be bad, but I do think it's going to be a deck that you want to fall into rather than like take
go after. Yeah, it's going to have to be wide open for you to want to draft it. Yeah,
exactly.
That's my feeling about it. And I think if we're talking color power rankings, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the color power rankings, other than that I think I like black the least. I think that's the thing I feel the most confident about.
Do you like? I was trying to not. I feel like one of our bits is we always underrate green, but I
I
did
like
sort of.
green.
I like green fine. I couldn't tell. Like I like red and blue the most. I'm down with liking black the least. I don't really like, despite liking a lot of White's decks, I don't like White's cards that much.
I feel that also, but I think the white signpost uncommons are strong enough to make up for lacking a lot of premium white cards.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get to our lists here. Top uncommons, notable commons, other Ben lists that he has in his spreadsheet. Where are we starting?
White uncommons, a banger, Glory Heath links, 1 and a white for an uncommon, 2/3 with lifelink, and whenever it attacks while saddled, you get to search your library for basic planes, put it into your hand. It's got a saddle cost of 2. The card is Nutter Butters. Nesting Bot in the number 2 slot, single white for the uncommon 1/1 with Start Your Engines. When it dies, you make a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. It's got max speed to give itself +1/+0. And then in third place, I've got Canyon Vaulter, 1 and a white for an uncommon 3/1 pilot. When it saddles a mount or crews a vehicle during your main phase, that gains flying until end of turn. I just think White's got a lot of good uncommons too. I think it's White's commons that we're not excited about. Just those 3 cards there are absolute bangers, and they're going to beat down hard in green,
Yeah.
white, and red, white. And
Yeah,
the nesting bot's going to be nuts in blue, white. Glory Heath is just good enough that you're going to play it everywhere.
I agree with that. I have the same 1 and 2 as you. I put a chonky sixer as my number 3, Detention Chariot, 4 white for a 6/6 vehicle. When it enters, target artifact or creature an opponent controls. You exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. It's got a crew cost of 3, and it has cycling for 1.
I love that a lot less, knowing how many ways there are to blow up artifacts and vehicles in the format. Like
Yeah,
when you spend 6 mana on that and then get blown out, that's going to be
by the plow
game
through or
losing.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, maybe it's less good. I just
All
thought
right, what do you got going on with blue?
Number 1, Roadside Blowout. 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Costs 2 less to cast if it targets a permanent with mana value 1. Return target creature or vehicle an opponent controls to its owner's hand and you draw a card. Number 2, I've got Spikeshell Harrier. 4 and a blue for a 4/4 artifact creature. When it enters, return target creature or vehicle an opponent controls to its owner's hand. If that opponent's speed is greater than each other player's speed, reduce it by 1. Can't reduce their speed below 1 with that. And Diversion Unit, as my number 3, is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 artifact creature with flying. You can pay blue, sack it to counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 3.
Yeah, I've got those same 3, just different order. I've got Diversion Unit 1, Spikeshell Harrier 2, and Roadside Blowout 3. I think mostly because of how much I want to play artifacts and how important having those premium artifact creatures is going to be.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Moving on to Black's Uncommons. Number 1. Ooh, maybe this isn't aging so well. I've got Gastel Raider, 2 and a black for a 2/1 Start Your Engines. When it ETBs, look at their hand, choose an instant or sorcery. That player discards that card. But also, Black's Uncommons just are not that good. It's like
This was tough.
Black is real. Like as far as individual cards go, not great.
It's like Grim Bauble. I say stand by it. Grim Bauble is doing a lot of work to make you excited about Black.
Yeah. Next up, I've got Hour of Victory, 2 and a black for the enchantment. Start your engines. When it ETBs, you make a 2/2 zombie, and then when you hit max speed, you can demonic tutor. And then lastly, I've got Wretched Doll. I kind of want to put that as my number 1 now, almost. 1 and a black for a 3/1 artifact creature toy, and it's got black, tap, surveil 1. But don't feel strongly about any of those 3 cards.
Yeah. I have Risen Necroregent as my number 1. That's the 5 mana 5/4 with the max speed payoff of getting a 2/2 every end step. I have Hour of Victory number 2. I just think what Black does best is
Start your engines.
I think it does start your engines better than it does.
And it enables it pretty well compared to other colors.
And so we should talk about, we haven't talked about these cards, but it got 2 cards. The set got 2 cards that we were sort of thinking is Start Your Engines going to have non-combat damage ways to enable it. And Black has a 4 mana 3/4 artifact that has whenever it or another artifact enters, you drain your opponent.
That card's so good.
Red has a 3 mana 1/4 with cycling. And when you cycle it, it deals the damage to the opponent. So just by cycling it, you can ping them. And also whenever you cycle or discard something, it pings them. So Red Black gets those engines as well. I just think that that's what Black does best. I do have Hour of Victory, similar thinking about Start Your Engines as my number 2. And then I put Carrion Cruiser as my number 3, the 2 in a black, 3/2, crew 1 vehicle. When it enters, you mill 2 and then return a creature or vehicle from your graveyard to your hand. Just not
Yeah.
a lot of 2-for-1s in the format.
That card's good. I think the vehicle should be in mine in place of Gastal Raider. I think I misevaluated that card. You can also make an argument that the black -1/-1 card that for cycling black should and could be in there. But again, it's all nothing is outstanding the way some of the other color pairs just get outstanding cards.
I agree.
All right, moving on to the red uncommons. What do you got here?
Number 1, I have Outpace Oblivion, 2 in a red for an enchantment with Start Your Engines. When it enters, it deals 5 damage up to 1 target creature or planeswalker, and you can pay 2 to sack this enchantment to have it deal 2 damage to each player who doesn't have max speed. Number 2, I have Grease Wrench Goblin, red for a 2/1 with Exhaust, 2 in a red, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This is just Fable of the Mirror Breaker at uncommon. And Road Rage is single red for an instant, deal X damage to target creature or planeswalker, where X is 2, plus the number of mounts and vehicles you control.
Yeah, red has so many banger uncommons. I have 2 of the same as you. I have Road Rage in number 1, the Shock Plus, and then I have Grease Wrench Goblin in number 3. And maybe that should be higher. I love your take that is Fable at uncommon, but it's very strong. And then in number 2, I have Endrider Spike Spitter. This is 3 in a red for an uncommon, 3/4 reach, start your engines. And if you have max speed at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You can play that card this turn. That's got to be one of the best max speed payoffs.
This and Hour of Victory, I think, are the 2 best at non-rare.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm glad you got to shout that out.
All right, moving on to green. In the number 1 slot, I've got Greenbelt Guardian. 1 on a green for a 2/2, and you have the activated ability of green to give target creature trample until end of turn at instant speed. That's pretty nice. And it's got Exhaust, 3 in a green, put 3 +1/+1 counters on this creature.
Hello, Sora Form Hybrid. How you doing?
Yeah, that card's strong.
Yeah.
The number 2 slot, speaking of huge, Earth Rumbler, 4 and a green for a 7/6 uncommon vigilance trample, crew 3, and you can exile an artifact or creature from your graveyard to make it an artifact creature until end of turn. And then in the number 3 slot, I've got Autarch Mammoth, 4 GG for the 5/5 whenever it enters, and whenever it attacks while saddled, you make a 3/3 elephant creature token, and it's got a saddle cost of 5.
Chonkers. I have the same 1 and 3 as you, and my number 2 is Fang Guardian. That's the 4 mana 4/2 flash. Give a thing +2/+2 until end of turn when it enters.
That card's great. Also, your thing that searches up a vanilla thing, you're kind of talking me up on. Green also has some very strong uncommons.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. All right, I feel like I always make you go first with the notable comments, so I'm going to go first. And I realize I already had Dynamite Diver on there, so I'm going to leave that, and I'll leave Spin out, though I like the idea that it probably doesn't belong. Anyway, my top 10 notable comments are Ride's End, 4 and a white instant, costs 3 less to cast if it targets a tapped permanent, exile target creature or vehicle. Flood the Engine, 2 and a blue aura, tap a thing, keep it tapped, enchanted permanent loses all abilities and doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. Nimble Thopterist, 3 and a blue 3/2. When it enters, make a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Trip Up, our TOB of the format, 3 and a blue instant. Target non-land permanent's owner puts it on their choice of top or bottom, and it has cycling 2. Grim Bauble, single black artifact. When it enters, target creature and opponent control gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Pay 2 and a black, tap, sack it to surveil 2. Spin out, 1 black, destroy target creature or vehicle at instant speed. Dynamite Diver, single red, for a 1/1, saddles, mounts, and cruise vehicles as though its power were 2 greater, and when it dies, deal a damage to any target. Lightning Strike, 1 and a red, instant, deal 3 to any target. Stampeding Scurryfoot, the single green 1/1 with Exhaust, 3 and a green, put a counter on it, make a 3/3 elephant. And Night Market, ETB tapped land, choose a color, tap, add a mana of any of the chosen color, and has cycling 3.
We are not very lined up in our lists. We're a little all over the place. The only 3 we have matching up, I think, are 3 locks. Nimble Thopterist, we should talk about this card. This card, I think, is likely to be the best common in the format. I think it's 3 and a blue for a 3/2, 1/1 Thopter token. It's one of the only things that make 2 bodies. It's going to be great in the artifacts decks. It's going to be great in the non-artifacts decks because you're going to get 2 bodies. It's just a really strong card. I think that and Grim Bauble are going to be vying for the number one slot, but Grim Bauble is just in such a what I perceive to be a weak color at the moment. But Grim Bauble's
Yes.
also insane. And then Lightning Strike's just a great rate card. My other commons, Leonin Surveyor, 1 and a white for a 2/2 start your engines. During their turn, this creature has first strike and max speed. You can exile it from your graveyard to draw a card. Guide Light Optimizer, which is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 artifact creature. It's a robot. You can tap it to add blue, and you spend that mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability. Really like that in the blue artifacts decks. There's Wreckage Wickerfolk, 1 and a black for a 1/3 flying. When this creature enters, Surveil 2. I think that's going to be, again, insanely strong in blue-black artifacts. It's a 2-drop that smooths your draw. Like that quite a bit. It's also going to be great at enabling start your engines for black-red. I think it's like at the intersection of a lot of what, if black is going to be good, like black gets a few cards, but I think are going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting. I've got Packed Doll Terror. Maybe black is great. I don't know. I don't like a lot of black's cards, but I really like these 3 black cards. Packed Doll Terror, 3 and a black for the 3/4. This was what you were talking about. When this creature or another artifact you control enters, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. 3 black. After talking trash about black all format, I have 3 of them in my 10 notable commons. I have Run Over, which is 1 and a green for an instant. Spell costs 1 less to cast if it targets a mount or a vehicle you control. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. I think it's going to be nuts in green-white. And then Pothole Mole. Got to put my money where my mouth is. The Tuna G2/3, Mill 3, return a land card. And then lastly, I've got Hazard of the Dunes, 3 and a green for a common. It's 4/4, Trample Reach. Nick's got Exhaust for 6 and a green to put 3 +1/+1 counters on those creatures. So I definitely like green more than you.
You definitely like green more than me. It's hard for me. I don't know where green lands because I feel like I just underrate green a lot. You're talking Wreckage Wickerfolk is a great call. It's a 1 and a black 1/3 flyer. When it enters, Surveil 2. Interacting with start your engines with artifacts. 2-drop that smooths your draws. I like it a lot.
I feel like my list is more reflective of what I expect key commons to be for various archetypes. And your list is more generically good removal spells, that sort of thing. I think that's why we have such big differences. But I think it was weird. We were talking about the format last night a little bit before we shut it down because we realized we were blowing it for the episode. But I think the cards were really hard to evaluate. But I also think at the same time, after you play like 4 or 5 games and get to play with the cards, I think a lot of stuff is going to crystallize pretty quickly about whether artifacts can hang with the Naya beatdown stuff. I'm also, like, the more I look at my top commons list, I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about green-black getting just some great rate cards.
Like what?
Pothole Mole, Hazard of the Dunes. Pothole Mole's going to be very good in green-black. And then you're going to get that 6-mana stuff. Like, I guess, I think the format is well... I guess what I'm trying to say is I think the format is well set up to be potentially interesting. If what I'm right about are the polls of the format. It's like, so if the format is artifacts versus Naya, and then you also have blue, red, and black, green as powerful decks that, like, when they're open, get, like, if those two can compete when they're open with the other stuff, I think this could be a really cool, interesting format. I have a list of 10 sleeper commons that I will forgo unless you want to get into them.
If there's anything that we haven't had a chance to talk about, I will allow you to talk about it.
Okay. So first up, Venom Sack Lagak, 1 green for the 2/1 Death Touch. Whenever it attacks while saddled, it gets +0/+3 until end of turn. I think this is going to be really annoying to playing. And certainly it's going to be great in green-white mounts, but also if you care about starting your engines, it's going to be very difficult to block when you saddle it up. Like when it's attacking as a 2/4 Death Touch. Like a lot of times you would just hit that through, let that through, no big deal. But it might be a big deal if you care about, stopping someone from getting to max speed. I gotta shout out this next card, Migrating Ketrodon, 4 GG for a 6/6 with reach. When it enters, you gain 4 life. Cycling 2, Honey Mammoth with cycling.
Yeah.
This card looks like it's going to be strong in green, black, and green, blue.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've seen the whole format, can we talk about Hull Drifter a bit? So this is 3 blue for the 2/2 flying vehicle with a crew cost of 3. When ETBs, draw 2 cards. How good do you think that is now that we've seen the whole format?
I don't know.
I also don't know. It's so hard to evaluate.
I think it's it feels like it's into the fake court-ish to me. Like, there's not a lot of card draw in the format. And
I think Blue's missing instant speed card draw for sure, if it's missing anything.
And so getting synergistic card draw as an artifact, like, I think it's more exciting than it appeared at first blush.
Yeah. So I've got my eyes on Hull Drifter as a sleeper common for blue, white, and blue, black. But again, I still could see it being not that interesting. This next card I think is super interesting. It's Guidelight Matrix, 2 mana for an artifact, and when it enters, you draw a card. It has 2 tap to essentially saddle a mount at sorcery speed, or 2 tap, animate a vehicle at instant speed. This is going to lead to some bad. Like, they usually don't make cards like this that are onboard tricks for vehicles. I think this is going to get some people and lead to some real feel bads. But I like this card in that I think it's very cool. I think it's going to be awesome in blue, black, and blue, white. Unclear how good it's going to be outside of that, but I really like this. It feels prophetic prism ish. And if there's a golden egg, I kind of like Guidelight Matrix as my early pick for a golden egg.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, the fact that there's no prophetic prism makes me a little sad. And we haven't talked about, there's not a lot of fixing in the format. That main land with cycling is kind of it's definitely your best way. I mean, there's gain lands as well in like whatever the land slot. They're not commons, but anyway, I digress. I agree. This is going to be gluey for sure.
And so your thought about not a lot of fixing, I don't think I have that impression. I think there's the lands and then there's artifacts that fix if you're going to want it. I think more my question would be is, well, more my question is how incentivized are you going to be to want to splash? Because so many of the archetypes feel linear and or like the beatdown ones have great like CD mana costs or whatever for their 2-drops. So you're not going to want to splash around there to risk missing those on curve. And then the I guess the artifact ones, maybe like Esper artifacts certainly I think is going to be a thing, splashing one or the other. Like certainly you're going to want to splash the blue black signpost uncommon or the blue white signpost uncommon in your artifacts decks.
But I think it might, but that might be tricky. I just think I don't know if maybe it's not single pipped, but I just think a lot of the rares are great in the format, and I would like to be able to play them if I can.
Yeah. That's fair for sure. That is the one thing I have totally been swamped this week, and I have not done my due diligence. I have not looked at the rares since we talked last week, so I don't have a picture of how those stack up against the commons and uncommons.
Yeah, this format is tough to evaluate. Like I
tough to evaluate without playing with it, but I think it's going to crystallize pretty quickly. But also highly hopeful that after it crystallizes is still going to be super interesting and fun.
Well, and I think some of those, if we think blue, red, and green, black are on the low end of the archetype pecking order, I think maybe then, but I don't think they're terrible. Like I think there's tools there for those decks to, reach their ceiling, and I'm sure DeFore will show us, but like, I think, there's going to be ways to get into those decks or responsible ways to get into those decks as off ramps. And then you're going to reap some rewards because I think there's tools there for sure.
So any parting thoughts before we go here about broad format strokes?
So nothing that I haven't said really yet, but like I am thinking of this similar to OTJ right now. I think like I'm looking at bombs, removal, and efficiency as being king and synergy as secondary. I think the rares and mythics are going to give you the synergy payoffs as well. Like I think you're going to get basically interaction at common and like strong role players at uncommon. And then a lot of your like direction is coming from your rares. That's my take currently. And I think there's a lot of like the 2-color signposts that are 2-drops. There's like CCDD mythics, the Gear Hulk cycles. Like I think you're going to get paid off for staying open in this draft format. That's my take right now. That doesn't help for, if you're doing sealed at your LGS for pre-release, it's not quite going to be relevant, but starting with drafts, that's where I'm at. And obviously just being super choosy about the vehicles you put in your deck because you can't play a ton of them.
That checks out with me. I think for me, I think I would say have moved up on the format. What I expect my enjoyment level to be quite a bit after seeing the full card list from what we saw previewed the prior week. So really looking forward to the format. Also really looking forward to MC Chicago. That's going to be in a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks here. That's coming up rapidly. So I'm excited to jam the format and draft a lot. And I think the biggest questions I have are, what I perceive to be the best decks are the aggro beatdown decks still, I think. Red, white, green, white early on. are there enough tools to combat that and get to the late game? And I'm cautiously optimistic that there are. And I think if that holds true, I think we're going to have a great format on our hands.
Yeah, I think I've definitely come up on it from last week where I was pretty skeptical. That's partially because I think Start Your Engines isn't as oppressive. Like none of those payoffs seem like there's a few, obviously, but they're all just sort of incremental boosts. And so it doesn't feel like it's as snowbally as I was worried it was going to be.
Yes, but I still think an interesting, cool mechanic to build around and think about. I think that 1-2 punch of starting it and getting to 2 on that same turn is going to be pretty big, and then you only need 2 more subsequent turns to enable it. And I like that living in the Mardu space as well. And I really like white. You know, if we're talking about these spectrums, I think white's really versatile about doing everything.
Okay.
So, all right, go forth, conquer. Good luck at your pre-releases, everyone. We'll be jamming on the Wizards Early Access. Thanks to Wizards for hitting us up with some free previewed accounts, #sponsored, all that stuff. That's on Wednesday, correct?
Yeah, so Wednesday, I assume you'll be streaming. I'll put some stuff up on our YouTube channel in the second half of the week. So we'll have some early access Aetherdrift content for you there, and then obviously jamming drafts next week.
Ooh, we have a professional development work day on Wednesday. Kids don't have school, so I'm definitely not teaching lessons after school. I might take half a personal day so that I can leave early and start jamming with everybody else and play all day on Wednesday. That sounds pretty good to me right now.
That sounds great to me too. Love that for you.
Yeah. Okay, great place to wrap us up. Thank you, as always, to Salty Pretzels for our intro and outro music. Make sure you give it a listen.
You can find all of our content on our website, lordsoflimited.com. There's links to our YouTube channel, our Twitch pages, respectively, our merch, courtesy of TeePublic, our Patreon page, our tier lists, all that stuff available at lordsoflimited.com.
If you've got any feedback about the show or any questions, shoot us an email at lordsoflimited@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Lords of Limited.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.